Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and I want to talk about understanding literature reviews. So in this video, we're going to review the purpose and objectives of a literature review, and we're going to discuss the process of writing a literature review. So let's get into this. So literature reviews really should accurately and objectively report relevant information learned from a variety of different sources. The purpose of it is to organize the information, to provide insight, and answer the research questions of the study. It also should demonstrate you as the researcher's expertise, and it should provide the reader with an in-depth understanding of the topic. So your research questions should really be answered through the help of defining key terms. You should be able to identify, discuss, and connect theories and models with your research questions. You should be able to examine and connect current research studies and their findings in your research questions, or to your research questions. Explore case studies from organizations that succeed or failed at addressing a similar issue, and it also enables you to become an expert on your topic. So definitions are really important in your paper, and so you need to make sure that you understand what needs to be defined. So use expert sources to define your key terms and ensure an understanding to help make sure that everybody's on the same page. So an example of a research question that does this is, what is the value and importance of critical thinking to effective leadership? If that is one of your research questions, what is the value and importance of critical thinking to effective leadership, you might define critical thinking in your definitions area. And so critical thinking is a higher level of thinking that is purposeful and well-reasoned. And so with that definition, you would also cite your scholarly sources on that. Who said that, using a proper APA citation. I'll show you an example here in a minute. Leadership effectiveness requires making good decisions and taking action when faced with complex, ambiguous, and changing data. And then you're citing the sources. So theories. What are key theories or models? So your goal is to identify and discuss relevant theories and models using expert sources. So for an example, your research question might be, what is the value and importance of critical thinking to leadership effectiveness? And you could be saying, according to the American Philosophical Association, as cited in cite the source, critical thinking requires 6 cognitive thinking skills and a critical spirit. A critical spirit is an attitude, not a skill. 8 traits are required. And so then you would cite your sources. Research. What are the important studies? So goal. Examine and connect relevant research studies to your issue and research questions. So for an example, your research question might be, what is the value and importance of critical thinking to effective leadership? And so Collins, 2001, research found that top leaders lead with questions, not answers. And so the question again was, what is the value and importance of critical thinking to leadership effectiveness? And then you're citing your source there. Natalie and Ricci, 2006, found new ideas emerge when leaders examine assumptions and consider differing perspectives. So again, we are answering the questions with our literature review. And so every paragraph is pulling out data that is a source that you're supporting the research question. So, case studies. what succeeded and failed. So the goal is to discuss and connect relevant case studies to your leadership issue and research question. So your research question again is, what is the value and importance of critical thinking to leadership effectiveness? And of course, this is just an example. And so, citing a source, Argus, 1991, compared outcomes when professionals did and didn't think critically in evaluating project outcomes. And of course, I'm paraphrasing what this article about Argus is about, written in 1991. Second one, Smith, 2003, studied the impact of critical thinking on business projects. So here I'm paraphrasing. So it's important to remember that your literature review should interpret, analyze, meaningful integration, and evaluates 8 or more sources to answer your research questions. So it's not just a series of summary of your sources. So let's look more into this. Preparing your literature review goal. Determine what data from each source addresses each research question. So the process, interpret, analyze, and integrate the information to understand its meaning, significance, and connection to your issue. And then evaluate the credibility and logic of each source, and then cite your source. Analyzing sources. Consider what is the relationship among concepts and ideas. What stated and unstated assumptions were made, what similarities and differences exist among sources, and how can you objectively present all perspectives. So integrating the data, it's really important that you make sure that for each research question you identify essential ideas or themes, definitions, theories, models, research studies, and case studies that must be addressed to respond to the research question, and then organize writing by research question and then by themes integrating the sources. Recognize new knowledge emerges, enabling you as the researcher to draw reasonable conclusions and recommend action. So let's review. So the literature review analyzes and synthesizes information to discuss and connect with definitions, theories, models, current research studies, and case studies. As the researcher, you must analyze, interpret, integrate, and evaluate sources to fully answer your research questions. And then new knowledge emerges, enabling you as a researcher to draw valid conclusions and make recommendations from comprehensive literature reviews. So let's take a look at this paper. So as you can see in this paper, it gives you a background of the study a little bit. And it talks about the problem statement. So this is a psychology paper. And notice how every paragraph is supported by almost every paragraph is supported by research. The purpose of the study is what a good clinical therapist does with regard to resistance to help the client unfold and break through defenses against his own self-knowledge to get to know himself. Counseling via psychotherapy is not meant to train or mold the mind or tell people what to do and how to do it. It represents Taoism philosophy that infers an uncovering of barriers to mental illness and non-interfering way of helping. Guide. The method of seeking self-knowledge represents intrinsic meaning and suggests a successful process for growing into the best human being that one can be. If there is no tool or technique available that can assist the therapist with identifying resistance levels of patients, therapists may be better armed with data that may be able to help them predict meaningful and effective interventions. So that's the whole purpose of this study. So let's take a look at the research questions. The research designed to evaluate the usefulness of resistance measurement tools has addressed several aspects of the issue, but since that area of client resistance is so broad, most studies cannot adequately and comprehensively cover every dimension of this topic. The focus of this study is on evaluating the usefulness of a specific client resistance scale at various times in the psychotherapeutic process. The research questions are as follows. What are the pros for integrating the client resistance model, and then it's citing the model, into a psychotherapy practice at the beginning, middle, and end of treatment? What are the cons for integrating this? So as you write your paper, you should be able to dive into the literature to understand what took place and why, and how you came to the conclusions that you did. So notice here is the definitions. Resistance in general with the regard to the concept psychotherapy, including the psychotherapist. This force refers to opposition to progress, motion, or person. With regard to psychoanalysis, resistance describes a process in which ego opposes conscious recall of unpleasant experiences. So as you can see how these definitions support what you're doing in the research process. It helps you understand key terms that are going to be supported in your literature review. So let's dive into the literature review and see what this author does. So here's an introduction in the literature review that gives a little bit of history. Here's a little bit of research in here that kind of gives a historic perspective. She goes into more history here. And she takes it more into modern day literature as she dives into this. And this is a very long literature review. So I encourage you to take a look at, go into the literature databases and see if you can find some literature reviews or some dissertations that are written on topics that your final paper is going to be about. So it gives you a better idea of what is taking place. So anyway, I hope this video has been somewhat helpful to you. I don't want to make it run on and on, but I do ask that you go and find samples, make sure they're APA samples, and then support your ideas in each of your paragraphs well. All right, hope this has been of some value to you. Thanks so much. Have a great day.